Yet another plane. Yet another city. I desperately hope that it won't be as gritty. Dee looked up from his little book and noticed that the line he was in had moved. He placed his backpack on the conveyor belt beside him and began to empty out his pockets. When a man in uniform waved him over, he stepped into the glass cage he pointed at and raised his hands. Two big metal arms rotated around him for a few seconds. Then a beeping noise sounded off, and he left the body scanner again, wondering whether the security guards behind it could actually see him stripped completely naked on their screens. He hasted on to his gate and boarded the plane that would take him to the East Coast. A few minutes after taking his seat, the aircraft set in motion, and when it soared up into the sky, Dee watched the giant grey city he had called his home for the last few months shrink below. During the flight, he switched back and forth between novels by Kerouac and Burroughs, both later works of the beat poets, which made very little sense to him. The high-pitched screams of Blixabagelt echoed in his ears as he sang about traveling in a haze of alcohol and jet lag. Bus. Escalator. Moving walkway. Baggage cart. Limousine. Elevator. Baggage tracing. The stewardesses went up and down the aisles, offering beverages and food. But since it wasn't complimentary, and Dee whatnot, a major credit card holder, he remained hungry. In regular intervals, the sound of the static was interrupted by advertisements for other things you could purchase on this flight. And when Dee took out a magazine from the compartment before him, he noticed that they were offering pretty much everything, from blankets and bags to beds and fireplaces. As the plane began to tumble, the ads were interrupted by the voice of the captain, who informed the passengers of the turbulence and told them to stay seated. As the jarring got more and more intense, Dee caught himself wishing for a crash. He was somewhat shocked by himself and could not really explain his morbid desire. But the turbulences passed, and shortly thereafter, they began their descent on New York. expensive cellar, and grateful for it, just because it's in the city that never sleeps. It feels like a win. Dee left the damp cellar he had moved into a few days ago and headed for the subway. He passed the small brick houses of his new neighborhood and ascended the stairs to the station. In the distance he could already make out a few skyscrapers. And to his right, countless cars were passing over an imposing green bridge. The train arrived and Dee got in. Soon the buildings around him rose higher and higher into the air. When the train disappeared underground and the windows turned black, Dee stared at the many colorful ads beside them instead. Next to an advertisement for Jeff Koons' exhibition, a gigantic pair of fake breasts was staring down at him. Beside the slogan, "Breast augmentation, made in New York." Dee got out at 23rd Street and walked up into the Madison Square Park. He tried to find a spot where he could smoke one of the small spliffs he had rolled earlier, but the park was incredibly crowded. Finally, he decided not to care and sat down on one of the many wooden benches beside an old man. After one last look around, he took out the drug-infused cigarette, lay down on his back, and inhaled. Behind the trees, towers with golden roofs rise high into the sky above. I have arrived in the city that can never get enough. Dee got up and walked out of the small park into the concrete canyons beyond. He left the flatiron-shaped building behind that had once started the age of skyscrapers and walked down the long street that cut through the otherwise evenly erected blocks. The further he came, the bigger the screens on the facades became. Them flickered to Dee's left and right as the humid air got hotter and hotter. Finally, he followed a giant scroll of screens into the halls of a huge store. As he passed through the revolving doors, a cold gust blew into his face and made him dizzy. When he looked up, he stared down a long, wide corridor to which sides men and women in dark uniforms tried to entice the stream of potential customers with their perfumes, beside countless more screens on which skinny models walked up and down on walkways. Dee slowly got used to the cold, but he decided to flee back into the heat nevertheless, when he noticed that the stream of customers had taken hold of him and was drawing him deeper and deeper into the store. When he escaped their grip, he tried to make out an exit, but everywhere around him there just lay further screens. Finally, he stumbled back outside, where flickering screens lured him to an incredibly crowded square.